Okay, so hello everyone. I'm very conscious we are in between you and lunch, but this should be an exciting enough panel to keep your attention, hopefully. So I'll probably just start off with asking the panelists who have not been introduced before to introduce themselves. So Anusha, would you like to go first?
Yeah, thanks, Kinga. Fantastic opening presentations. My name is Anusha Foy. I'm a partner in EY in our risk consulting practice, and I've been in life sciences for over 20 years. I was IQVIA Biotech Global Head of Regulatory Consulting, looking after the biotech and medtech groups, and then have been in management consulting. And in EY, we work with many organizations, small organizations, spin-outs, startups, biotechs, through to very large pharmaceutical, medtech organizations. Of course, AI is hugely important. It's transforming the sector. There's a huge interest, a lot of investment, and focus on the potential for AI. So really great to be part of the panel today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being with us. Peter? Would you like to go? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Going left to right.
So my name is Peter Brady. I'm a director at Orbital Global Group and also a director at a spin-out called Moderator. Both of those companies focus very much on the use of technology in healthcare, focusing on AI principally, but we also look at converging technologies around immersive tech, and we're also starting to look at quantum as well. We've worked with many of the big pharma companies in the deployment and use of AI, and working on a very exciting project at the moment looking at heart failure and personalised AI treatment configuration in heart failure, which is a big problem, and that's an exciting project to see the development of AI unfold in context of the regulatory frameworks in Europe.
Hello everybody, I'm Rose Hughes. I'm a patent attorney at Evolve Intellectual Property. We're a boutique pharma specialist IP firm. And in a former life, till very recently, I was a director in patents at AstraZeneca. And I think bringing in that experience, it's been fascinating to see how AI within AstraZeneca was affecting every single part of the pathway, from preclinical drug discovery development all the way up to on-market and patient compliance. And I think it's very interesting to see how it's playing around with all of that full pipeline.
Excellent introduction, actually, to the panel itself. So the aim today is to talk about the fact that we are at the peak of inflated expectations. I hope we all agree about that. And trying to look at ways to avoid the only way being down, rather staying up on top of it and avoiding the trough of disillusionment, which according to consulting companies is what's coming next. So I'd like to open up to the panel to, of course, we are incredibly diverse as well. So I'm going to try to make it very dynamic and allow everyone to talk freely. So expect maybe some disagreements along the way. We are all pro-AI, so you should all know that. Anyone wants to leave, they can do now. Okay, so opening up, who would like to go first around? What do we need to do to make sure that we keep the expectations rolling, funding rolling, and we deliver for patients?
Okay, I can start. So I think it's true that there were some early companies that pitched as AI drug discovery companies that have failed, right? The technology wasn't really ready, and the work that they've done was not seen as disruptive. Perhaps it's produced clinical candidates or clinical stage assets, but that those were not really differentiated from other methods that one can do conventionally. So that's perhaps where there could be some disillusionment, but we're really into the next generation of companies that are using different approaches. And I guess the new companies that are moving through that discovery phase and going into development over the next few years should be seen as the next wave and next generation with better methods. I mentioned that there are technologies available now, many open source technologies that are really quite disruptive. So AlphaFold 3 is one of them. There are other methods coming all the time that people are using as part of a workflow. And I think there's now more genuine use of AI rather than it being like an AI gloss on top of what is a conventional project. I think we also have human beings have a bit of a tendency to take things for granted very quickly once they've been adopted. So I also mentioned that protein folding technologies like AlphaFold are used in structural biology. You know, I spent almost 30 years doing conventional structure-based design projects, and a big problem was that you got a novel protein and you couldn't solve the structure because there's no other protein that looks like it, and that's how you solve structures. That's not a problem anymore because you can use the AlphaFold prediction to do isomorphic replacement and fit the data, and you've got the structure. So that's now taken for granted and is used in all the labs around the world as if it was always like that, and it really wasn't, 5 years ago. So we need to be careful we don't forget when things get all the way through the curve to being adopted that they weren't there even just a few years ago.
Yeah, I would second that. So that AstraZeneca, for example, there isn't a single preclinical drug program that is not going to have a slide which is your AlphaFold structure there, and it's just part of the whole ecosystem. So there isn't a department set off to one side, which is the AI department doing their own thing. It's part of the whole process at this point.
In fact, today it's offensive to ask, have you looked on AlphaFold? That implies that you're not doing your job right, I think.
Yeah, and it comes back to your point of resistance being futile. It is just there now. It's just part of the toolbox that R&D are using.
But yeah, AI is a tool. It's a tool that can be deployed across many things, not just AlphaFold, but as presented earlier, completely new ways of looking at the world to do things that even AlphaFold can't do. But I think in order to avoid that trough, that disappointment that's been out there, we know enough now to be careful about where and why we use AI and what for. There are some jobs out there, like hammering a nail into a wall. You don't use a sophisticated power tool to do that. You just use a hammer. So why use AI for something where you don't need AI? Why use AI for something, as Miles said, where you aren't going to do anything that's differentiated? But there are, in the right place, if you use the right tool with the right settings, it's versatile. It's enabling us to open up other areas that were just impossible before. And we're also wiser to not just the quality of data that goes into AI, we all know quality in, quality out, or the other phrase you can use for that, but also the different types of data that's going into AI. Kuano is using a totally different type of data, and we wouldn't be able to do that without AI. So yeah, we're smarter about it now. So I think to avoid that, to reset people's expectation of what it is, we just need to be mindful that this is a power tool. You've got to use it properly, otherwise you're just going to make a mess.
Very fair point. And I think we can all remember the Human Genome Project, how it was going to solve all diseases with immediate effect. So I think it also has to do with public perception on what AI is, and when you can use a hammer, you should continue to use the hammer, and then maybe you can avoid spending an extortionate amount of money.
I think I come from the perspective of global regulation, and following closely the evolution of AI regulation over the last few years has been fascinating. And we might look back and think the peak of the hype would be the proposal to have no regulation in the US, and that was shot down by the US Senate. So I think it was 99-1 in the US Senate to have they wanted a proposal to have a moratorium on regulation for AI in the States, and quickly shot down. So I think what will manage the hype and manage the public perception and avoid real serious voices of dissent is having appropriate regulation and guardrails. And Europe has played, I think the AI Act is a fantastic attempt to try and establish those principles of good data governance as well as AI, responsible AI development, monitoring, the risk management system, quality management system for an AI system throughout its life cycle. So really having appropriate guardrails, really thinking carefully about the data that we're using to train AI systems, and a global regulatory collaboration as well is incredibly important, and understanding that through the product development life cycle, I think, is critical. And we're seeing, the UK government is participating in global programs. There's a knowledge exchange. So I think that will help to manage the hype and also ensure safe and effective development of AI systems that will really benefit patients and also ensure cybersecurity, privacy, and protection of fundamental rights for all of us.
Safe and responsible AI for patients. Yeah. I know that Peter has a story that's ongoing right now.
I think I couldn't agree more with what was just said. Actually, I think I think the precursor to the hype curve coming through the other side is often mistakes, disasters that get amplified in the press, and then that starts to precipitate a decline in belief or confidence in the technology. And I think regulation and the regulatory frameworks have a really important part to play in that. I think in terms of Europe, we just contributed to a paper that's gone to the EU Commission, which was requested by them to look at the regulatory framework around personalising treatments using AI for heart failure. And I think the request was really made on the basis that I think they understand there is a danger that the regulatory framework is a really careful balancing act of promoting innovation without snuffing it out. And I think, trying to look at that balance to ensure that we don't make these big mistakes around use of AI that could be the precipitation of a really, unfortunate sort of changing in the viewpoint of what AI can deliver. Regulation has a really important part to play, and I think the EU certainly recognises that, and I think so the UK government recognises that, and it's going to be a very delicate balancing act to getting that right to get the best out of the technology.
Yeah, as we heard in the morning, I think when patients present with heart failure, the clinicians really struggle to predict who is going to make it through or not. But if they were to use an AI method and the patient didn't make it, then it would definitely be the fault of the new technology. So we have to be very careful about that. So maybe coming on to more of a UK relevant topic. This is a UK audience here, and we thought it would be quite interesting to explore what would position the UK exceptionally well for AI in drug discovery. And the panelists have quite a diverse toolkit under their belts as to what they think we could do as a UK-based community to exploit the resources that are uniquely available to us. So over to the panel. I don't know who wants to go first. There's several fascinating ideas on how to exploit AI.
I can jump in. I think one advantage we've got in the UK is that we have a single system. We all kind of love and hate the NHS, I guess, but it is a single system, and we've got things like UK Biobank, and in the US they don't have that. It's very fragmented, and you have big centres like MD Anderson or Fred Hutch that have got a lot of data locally, but it's not shared. So we do, I think, if we can really get organised, and I think the government's trying to do this with things like the Open Bind Consortium that's just launched as well on generating lots of data that would be suitable for drug discovery AI. I think if we can get organised, then there's the potential to use the data all across the NHS and that patient data in a responsible way that would allow us to do things like better diagnostics in the future, using imaging. We know already that AI systems can detect cancers in images much better than a human expert. So early diagnosis in cancer gives much better curative options for patients, obviously. So I think there's an opportunity here to do things that if we can fund it and get the data in a state that it can be used, gives us a significant advantage over the US and the way that system works.
Of course, we have a great ecosystem in the UK with our tech companies and also the pharma companies and the biotechs. And I think the interaction between those is going to be very important for living the hype. And so I think one consideration there is how we're actually going to structure the deals between the tech companies, between the AI development companies and the pharma companies, and thinking about ownership structures, the buckets in terms of IP. Obviously, the big pharma have all the data, whereas the tech companies have all the expertise in the AI, but they also have their own ideas about how the best data that they need. And actually, for successful collaborations and getting the drugs that we're developing to the clinic, there's going to be maybe the need for more creative agreements and structures other than we've just got a platform that we're licensing out to big pharma. It's going to be more of a collaborative structure. And then living with that deal and actually then taking it all the way through is going to be more of a collaborative nature.
I completely agree. It's the ecosystem that we've got. It's the diversity of innovation that we have in this country in a relatively small space as well. And that blend of cool stuff coming from both academia and industry. But if we're to make the most of that sort of multi-perspective, multidisciplinary way of working that enables us to really harness the true benefits of AI in its various different guises and applications, then we need to make it easier to work together. And you're exactly right about rethinking the kind of structures. I mean, you mentioned yourself, biotech and pharma. Well, why not biotech and biotech? We need to think a little bit more. In order for this to work, I think we need to think outside of the standard business models as well, and kind of what is the done thing in order to be seen as creating value. There should be value in small companies collaborating with small companies, because that's where you get the really cutting edge tech that maybe isn't well renowned just yet, combining with another cutting edge area to do something that's very, very cool. And we've got that close-knit ecosystem and everything, all sorts of types of different disciplines and innovation, all on one island that, we can, if we are able to work together in that way, we have the real opportunity to benefit from that collaboration.
Yeah, and the collaboration between the disciplines as well. So you mentioned regulatory and the science. So that's also got to interact with the IP. The IP has to first follow the science, but then it also really has to follow what the regulatory authorities are doing and what data they're requiring, what transparency requirements they're requiring for AI drug development. And that's got to lead into what the IP strategy has to be to protect that product when it's on the market.
Yeah, no, just to echo that, I would say the UK is a fantastic environment. I started my career early on at the UK MHRA, and the UK really is a centre of excellence for innovation and scientific, being at the forefront of innovation and discovery. And I think what we're seeing with the MHRA, from COVID, we were the first country to approve COVID vaccine, and the rolling review of regulatory data. That's propelled us into some very, agile regulatory mechanisms. We have ILAP and IDAP and AI sandbox environments. So I think the regulator is trying to work with organizations to really foster innovation and help companies to gain insights and guidance at an earlier stage, and joint advice with the HTA, with NICE, and also with the MHRA. So there's lots of initiatives, and the government also is trying to, really promote patient enrollment in clinical research, and there's a big investment in data and the NHS, and improvements being made to really advanced data across the NHS, and having a cohesive environment for utilising all of the NHS data that we have. But we also have environments like CPRD, which are fantastic repositories, and we see real-world evidence, real-world data studies being deployed. So I think there's a lot of fantastic things happening in the UK. Also, the UK Centres of Excellence for in silico that are being established, and computational simulation and modelling, particularly in medtech, being pioneered by In Silico UK in Manchester and Christabel Pankhurst. So we really are at the forefront, and just from colleagues on the panel, your presentations, I think it's amazing the position that the UK has, and hopefully it will propel and lead us into the future as one of the leading voices in AI and drug discovery, and transforming the life science sector.
I think amen to that, if I may say that. I really feel like all we need is catalyzers, like conferences like this one, where people can come together from different disciplines to start conversations, and also the funding bodies, because two small companies will struggle on the very first decision point, which is who's going to fund this.
Well, exactly, and that's why, you know, there's always this aspiration. If you've got a little company with the cutting edge technology, it's, well, thou shalt partner with pharma, because they tend to be able to, you know, support you financially and to bear the brunt of that. But if we can find ways in which one small cutting edge company can work with another small cutting edge company, or work with academia in a way that's financially sustainable for that business, then we have exponentially more possibilities of what we could do with AI and do just with, you know, combining different technologies together.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of things that nobody can do on their own. I was very tempted to put on a private island as my final slide, is that that's not how this is going to work. And I'm not sure if anyone is here from Sovereign AI, but I think the Open Bind Consortium is a good first fingerprint on how it could be done. And I'm sure we can build several others on the basis of that, where academia, industry, both small and large, can come together with different things to contribute. Of course, some people have to bring some money, some people will bring some data, and some people will bring compute capabilities. I think that's a very exciting initiative.
Maybe it's good to say something about data. I think as well as advances in AI and how we use that and how we interpret data and mine that data and discover targets, etc. I think we should acknowledge that there's actually much better data and ways to generate much deeper understanding now on clinical patient samples, but more generally across life sciences that weren't there even 4 or 5 years ago. So, and even in standard practice, in oncology, you know, everyone has an NGS profile. There's quite a lot understood and measured in patients that wasn't measured even a short while ago. So we have an opportunity to generate, you know, much better data, and AI systems are very hungry for data because they're basically statistical models, right? So they're not using physics-based systems, they're using just the data and inferring things. So I think that's another thing that's going to drive the usefulness, utility of AI systems in the future. And at Isomorphic Labs, we're constantly trying to find people to partner with that would bring us data to help us to computational biology questions on targets, or, you know, coupled with the protein structure understanding, what does that tell us about this area of biology? And so that's the collaboration around data types is going to be critically important, I think, and will make a big impact.
Yeah, I think big pharma can be very precious about their data, but then maybe realization needs to happen that it's one thing to have a lot of data, it's another to be able to mine that data, and that data be in the right format to actually do the drug discovery that you need to do. And I think them leaning on expertise from outside to do that, and also then having the models in place that will help them deal with that as a new way of working.
I think us scientists will often say that it's the lawyers who kill the deals, but I think we really need the fantastic lawyers like yourself. I think we, again, have this amazing opportunity here with a more modern mindset on what a good deal looks like. I'm a BD myself, right? So it's easy for me to point at the lawyers. It's the BDs as well. We need to find ways to come up with the right reward for everyone, and take into consideration what people can bring to a deal and what they're looking to get out of it, and be more dynamic. So I think especially for consortia building, it's quite a tricky challenge, because not everyone will have equal contribution. And I was actually part of a discussion of, are we building the next NATO here? You know, who's going to have voting rights, and are people going to say, oh, I'm the big pharma that contributed this much, so I want this, and no matter who votes for what, we are not going to get consensus because they heavily weight the vote. And then it becomes politics, and that's where I'd like to exit as a scientist. But we have to deal with it, because nobody can do it on their own. So I have a final question for the panelists. And
can I just add one thing? So we spoke just now about the need for collaboration for more data.
Yeah.
But as I mentioned, there is AI out there that's being used in sciences where you're not reliant on that input data. You don't need lots of massive data sets of training data for your algorithms. But we still need to collaborate. Yeah. So, for instance, Kuano would be looking to collaborate with those that actually have the quantum hardware when that comes through. So there's different types. It's not all data-driven AI. There are some that are more blue sky, and we still need to collaborate with those that have the complementary technologies.
Yeah. So everyone is welcome to come to the table with hardware, with data, with money, with really good lawyers who are willing to make deals work overall. In the interest of time, and lunch is coming up, I was very keen to have audience participation, but I think we have 1 minute left. So I think what would be more interesting to ask, assuming that this panel will formulate again next year, is to make a prediction. I'd love to say 5 years, but I think that would be just, crystal ball category. When we meet next year, where would you expect us to be? What would be the big thing that we achieved and the next big thing that we will be working towards?
I think, we are getting to that point now where we're realising that humans are part of this. You said it yourself, we've got to move away from that reductionist way of thinking. Humans are part of the system as well. When we're thinking about, but part of the trough has been because we thought artificial intelligence alone was the solution. We're now moving to that world of poly-intelligence or systems thinking, where it's not just artificial intelligence, it's human intelligence. And also what we can learn from the natural world as well, so natural intelligence, being able to put all these things together into that more systemic way of understanding and processing and using data.
So we will still be here in person, and it's not our AI agents that will be conversing in gibberish. Thank you, Kat. We'll see if we'll show up in person. Would you like to predict?
Yeah, I think for us, I don't quite agree on the last comment, because I think we're using AI systems in a human-augmented way. So you have an expert designer that uses the system as a tool and to, as I said, to replace crystal structures and replace wet lab experiments to make predictions. I think the next step for us is to use agentic systems where you don't need that human expertise, because you have a large language model that actually asks the question, uses the predictive data, then makes a decision, then asks another question. And that's what we're actively working on. So in a year or two's time, we'll be able to set these systems running, and they'll be carrying out iterations over many cycles and then coming up with a set of predictions of compounds that we want to go and make in the lab and test. And we'll be systematizing what we do as what we think of ourselves as creative medicinal chemists, making, amazing predictions from our vast experience. But in reality, it's just a process that the questions we're asking are the same questions that a machine can ask based on the data that it's given. So we're very focused on taking a human-led process using predictions from models to an agentic system that will be much more efficient.
So Miles will send his AI agent. I think I will also send my agent, to be honest, and just, spend my time in the garden. I think it's important that it will still be the human that asks the question.
Yeah,
right?
ultimately, the human will decide what's put into practice,
Yes,
but the human will be able to work on 5 projects at once instead of one project, right?
So you're enhancing.
But that's the poly nature. You're putting it all together to be greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, I was very careful in my talk. I said lab in the loop, and then I immediately said human in the loop as well. So we are also not laying off our scientists just yet. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think it is tackling those problems that humans can't tackle. So I'm going to link to the previous session. So cell therapies, new modalities, that's an area that's very, very, very difficult, but also bringing medicines that are curing uncurable diseases currently. And I think AI has a lot to offer that space as well, because it's something that as humans we find extremely difficult, but AI could add to that help.
So do you expect an approved drug?
So we have cell therapies, but approved. It's difficult to know if we get an AI approved drug, because it's involved in so much of the pipeline and the pathways that it's going to involve some AI. If a new drug is out there, then there's been some AI involvement, but how much was AI, how much was human? So it's just going to be part of the ecosystem.
Yeah. Thank you. Anusha, Peter?
Yeah, I think for me it's really, there has been the massive hype, and it's finding that balance between human in the loop, absolutely, but really working together with AI. As we see it's going to be hugely transformative. It's already changing every sector. All organizations are looking at the potential of agentic. And so it's really developing AI compliance and the safeguards to match the technological transformation and ensuring humans in the loop and that we don't lose that capacity. We don't become over-reliant. We use it in a responsible way. We don't lose the fantastic skills of humans and, you know, scientific discovery, that we foster, you know, training and, you know, graduates, and that original thought is still something that we can, you know, is a part of. So it's really human beings finding that medium with artificial intelligence, I think, is going to be one of the key questions of the future, and making sure we do that in a compliant way.
Compliance? Yes, Peter. Would you like to make a prediction next year when you're on this panel? What will we have achieved?
Next year, yeah. So yeah, I'd say I think the key thing is, my hope is an acceleration of where we're at. I think so long as the regulatory framework is developed in the right way, then getting to some of the key objectives in healthcare, drug discovery, and everything that we want to achieve will hopefully be quicker, faster, but also that human-in-the-loop augmentation of human capabilities is going to be really crucial. And that's going to be important that we don't lose that. I mean, I noticed only today that Microsoft have laid off 9,000 people. So it's, you know, how the next generation of scientists and people working in drug discovery and biopharma are going to come through. I think that needs to be considered quite carefully.
Thank you so much. So I think we'll see who will be here next year in person and who will send their AI agent. Time will tell. Thank you so much for taking part in the panel. For the panelists, amazing. Thank you.